Nedarim Daf Membeis brings two Mishnahs. It begins with a Mishnah and ends with a Mishnah. The primary discussion of the Daf is a neder which is made on Shemitah fruits. Now, Shemitah fruits don't belong to someone. The question is, could his neder apply to those Shemitah fruits? We'll have three cases. Two are clear in the Mishnah. The third one is a Machlokes Amarayim, and we'll bring proofs to which way we hold. So, the three cases that apply to Shemitah are if somebody makes the neder on the fruits before Shemitah, if someone makes the neder on the fruits before Shemitah and then Shemitah begins, and if someone makes the neder on the fruits on Shemitah. Now, as we said, Shemitah fruits don't belong to someone. You can't make a neder asering things which don't belong to you on someone else. You have to either be the person that the neder is on or own the object. Now, our Mishnah will discuss two situations. Number one, the fruits themselves, and number two, the land that he is owning and asering. And our Mishnah will speak about if the neder was phrased as asering his hana or asering just the eating. So let's begin. The Mishnah says, if you make the neder before Shemitah, and we're discussing before Shemitah itself, then Shemitah is not a factor. Then you can aser fruits and you can aser land. So if he says to someone, you're not have hana from me, then that person is not allowed to have hana from his land. He's not allowed to enter his land. He's also not allowed to eat his fruits. Now, the same is true if he asers just food. If he asers his food, then it doesn't apply to his land. He's allowed to enter his land, but he's still not allowed to eat his fruit. Now, the Mishnah skips the middle case, which is when he makes the neder before Shemitah and then Shemitah begins. The Mishnah now goes to what happens if he makes a neder on Shemitah. So the fruits don't belong to him on Shemitah, and therefore the neder is not chal on his fruit. So the Mishnah spells out as follows. His land, it is forbidden to enter. Unless he makes the neder on his food, then his land he's allowed to enter. However, whichever way it is, he cannot aser his fruits, and therefore his fruits are mutter, even if he makes a neder on food, even if he makes it not on food, the fruits stay mutter. Of course, this is only if you can actually access the fruits without entering the land. So this would be branches of a tree that overhang another person's property or something along those lines. Now the Gemara begins. The Gemara says, what happens if a person makes a neder before Shemitah, and therefore it's able to be chal on his fruits, but then Shemitah begins? Does the neder stay now that it's no longer his property? So the Gemara quotes statements of Rav and Shmuel against Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. According to Rav and Shmuel, the neder stays in force even when Shemitah arrives. According to Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, the neder stops on the fruits once neder arrives because they're not his any longer. Now, they each bring the other cases that are mentioned in the Mishnah. They don't change the halacha there, but the way they phrase the neder is different. The Gemara ignores this at first, and we're going to get back to it later. The way Rav and Shmuel have the neders being phrased is he said, these fruits are aser. According to Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, he said, my fruits are aser. Now, the Gemara wants to know, what is the machlokes about? It seems to be that machlokes is about if somebody asers his possessions, does the iser stay even when they're no longer his possessions? Is it possible for somebody to aser something even, and that should continue even after it leaves his rishos? So the Gemara first wants to say that Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish say, no, you cannot do that. And Rav Yochanan and Rav and Shmuel say, yes, the iser continues even after it leaves his rishos. Now, the Gemara rejects this because the Gemara says there is no way anybody could possibly hold that the Isser comes off when it leaves his rishos. The Gemara shows that from Rabraisa. The Gemara actually has two kashas. The first kasha is, if we're talking about, if the whole machlokes is about if a person could ask something that leaves his rishos, why would we ever discuss the case where he says, my fruits? My fruits is a whole different question. It's when he says my fruits, what happens if they're not my fruits anymore? Did he mean to limit his neder as long as they were mine, and therefore when they become no longer his, it's canceled? That's a much more likely scenario, a much more likely halacha than if he says these fruits, and we're saying that it doesn't matter that he wanted it to continue after they were not in his possession. He did not want to limit it to his possession, and still he can't aser anymore because halachically he can't apply an issue to something when it's not his anymore. So if that was the issue, we should have just discussed the case of these fruits. We should not have talked about my fruits at all. That's the Gemara's first kasha. The Gemara's second kasha is one which the Gemara deals with, and that's we have a Mishnah which is pretty clear that the Isser could continue. The Mishnah discusses where somebody asers his possessions on his own son. He says, you're not going to have any enough for my things, and then he dies. Can the son inherit it or not? So it depends how we phrase it. If you said you're not going to have hana for my things, that's it, then the son is able to inherit it because he didn't mean for it to continue after he dies. If, however, he said you're not going to have enough for my things, not in my lifetime and not after my death, and he explicitly asked it after he died, then the son cannot use it even if he inherits it, and therefore it's as if he didn't inherit it. Now, so there you see clearly that he can ask it even when it's no longer his possessions. After he dies, it's not his possessions anymore. The Rishonim explained the Yerusha happens automatically. It goes into the son's Rishos automatically. The question is, can he use them now that they're not his? Now that they're not the father's any longer. Now, so anyway, so it's clear from this Mishnah that you can make an Isser continue after you want. More so, that's not a kasha here because here he specifically, explicitly said I want it to continue after it leaves my Rishos. That could be you could do. Maybe this whole question here is where he didn't explicitly say I want it to continue. What would be the issue there? But the Gemara says that wouldn't answer our first kasha because then we should have just said the case of where he says these fruits. Why do we talk about where he says my fruits? So the Gemara therefore wants to adjust it. The Gemara wants to say maybe the question is what does the person mean when he says my fruits? Does he mean for it to continue after it's no longer mine, or does he mean for it to be also only as long as it's his? So that would be the machakas between Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish against Rav and Shmuel. Now the Gemara says this can't be the machakas because the halacha there is clear. There is a difference between if you say my fruits or if you say these fruits. And we see that from the Mishnah, which differentiates, but here it's slightly different, but it's the same idea. It's between where somebody says these fruits and someone says your fruits. It's actually not talking about fruits, it's talking about possessions. Someone says your property or he says this property. And the Mishnah is clear that if he says your property, the Isser only applies as long as it's yours, as long as it belongs to the other person that he's answering. If he says this property, then it extends irrespective of ownership. So therefore, in our case as well, you have to be machalik. The Mishnah is clear that is a difference between if you say mine or if you say this. So therefore, the Gemara says that can't be that there's any opinion that holds that there's no difference and that the Isser is even if you say this. So the Gemara ends up saying that there's no machlokes between Rav Shmuel and Yochanan Rish Lakish at all. They're just talking about two different cases. Rav and Shmuel were talking about where he said these fruits, and therefore the Isser applies even after it's no longer his, because he didn't make it anything to do with ownership. And you're allowed to make something usher even after it leaves your possession, as long as you made the Isser while it was in your possession. And Rish Lakish were talking about where he said my fruits, and his intent explicitly was to limit the Isser to as long as it is his, and therefore once it's no longer his, the Isser ends. Now, in the end of the Mishnah, we had said that once Shemitah arrives, that affects the fruit, but it doesn't affect the Isser on the land. It's still usher to go into the guy's land. So my question is, when it's Shemitah, the land doesn't belong to him either. It becomes Kadosh Hashem. He doesn't own the land. And that's learned out in the Gemara and Shvius that it has to be the way, because if you can restrict a person from entering your property, what's the significance of the Torah making your fruits permitted? No one can come reach it. So obviously anybody can enter your land, and therefore you can't make that Isser. So how can we say that the Isser for the person to enter his land still exists even on Shemitah? So the Gemara gives two answers. The Gemara's first answer is to say that we're talking about where trees are on the edge of the property, and therefore you can get to the trees without entering deeper in. And the Isser is to go deeper in, that you don't have to do. The Heter is only to enter the Rishos as far as you need to go to reach the fruits, and he doesn't have to. Our second answer is Rav Shimon ben Eliakim, who says that it's Gzeira, and that's you're only permitted to enter the guy's Rishos in order to get to the trees and to take what you need and to leave. You're not allowed to stand or hang around there any longer because there's an Isser Hana now. So therefore, we make an Isser D'Rabbanan and say don't enter the property, only take what you can reach from outside the property. All right, now we end off the daf with the Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses what happens if someone has an Isser Hana on him. Is he allowed to borrow money, borrow object, or sell? Mishnah says all things are forbidden. You cannot borrow or lend money. You can't borrow or lend objects. And you cannot buy or sell if you have an Isser Hana between you and the other person you're dealing with.